Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. We start from the United States, where the Senate has voted to move forward with former President Donald Trump's impeachment trial, declaring it constitutional. The 100-member chamber voted 56 to 44, with 6 Republicans joining all 50 members of the Democratic caucus. Trump was impeached by the House last month on charge of inciting an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on the 6th of January. In Afghanistan, the government says its forces have killed 22 Taliban fighters during an operation in eastern Ghazni province. The Defense Ministry also claimed to have destroyed a Taliban base. However, the Taliban say the attack in their Yak district of the province was repulsed and only 3 fighters were killed. In Myanmar, protesters have returned to the streets of capital Naypyidaw after clashes in the anti-coup demonstrations yesterday. Hundreds of government workers marched in support of a civil disobedience campaign that has also been joined by the doctors. Meanwhile, the United States and United Nations have condemned the use of force against protesters. Palestinian factions Fatah and Hamas have agreed on the mechanisms for upcoming legislative and presidential elections. In a joint statement, 12 Palestinian factions pledged to abide by the timetable for the long-delayed balloting and accept the results. The reconciliation was reached at the end of the 2-day session of intra-Palestinian talks in Egypt's capital, Cairo. World Health Organization's data shows that the global number of new coronavirus cases has declined for the 4th week in a row. However, Mexico reported over 10,000 new cases and more than 1,700 deaths, bringing the total to over 168,000. Pakistan has registered over 1,000 new cases and 62 deaths overnight, taking the tally to 12,128. While globally, the virus has claimed over 2.3 million lives and infected nearly 107 million people so far. And in football, Manchester United have beaten West Ham United 1-0 to qualify for the quarter-finals of the FA Cup. Scott McTominay scored United's winner in extra time to send the Red Devils through. United have reached the last 8 for the 7th consecutive year as they bid to lift the trophy for the first time since 2016. Top stories, news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. We'll start from the United States, where the Senate has voted to move forward with former President Donald Trump's impeachment trial. Trump faces a charge of incitement of insurrection over the deadly January 6 Capitol Hill riots.
The 100-member chamber voted 56 to 44, largely along the party lines, declaring the trial constitutional. As the proceeding began, House impeachment managers presented a video interspersing images of the Capitol violence with clips of Trump's incendiary speech. Meanwhile, Trump's lawyers termed the proceeding as unconstitutional and partisan effort to close off Trump's political future. Only 6 Republicans, including Senator Bill Cassidy, joined the Democrats in voting to go ahead with the trial. Democrats hope to disqualify Trump from ever again holding public office, but Tuesday's outcome suggested they faced long odds.
I said I'd be an impartial juror. Anyone listening to those arguments, the House managers were focused, they were organized, they relied upon both precedent, the Constitution, and legal scholars. They made a compelling argument. President Trump's team were disorganized. They did everything they could but to talk about the question at hand. And when they talked about it, they kind of glided over it, almost as if they were embarrassed of their arguments.
Trump's conviction seems unlikely as the Democrats are well short of two-thirds majority. It is required to indicate the former president in the evenly split 100-seat Senate.
Now, in Afghanistan, the government says its forces have killed 22 Taliban fighters during an operation in eastern Ghazni province. The Defense Ministry also claimed to have destroyed a Taliban base. Meanwhile, the Taliban say the attack in Day-Yak district of the province was repulsed and only 3 fighters were killed. Earlier, several Western embassies said that the Taliban were responsible for the majority of targeted violence. US President Joe Biden's administration is reviewing how to handle the peace process. It includes a troop withdrawal agreement Washington signed with the Taliban under former President Donald Trump. Now, in Myanmar, protesters have returned to the streets of capital Naypyidaw after clashes in the anti-coup demonstrations yesterday. Thousands of people also joined demonstrations in the main city of Yangon. In Naypyidaw, hundreds of civil servants and doctors marched in support of a growing civil disobedience campaign. There have been reports of serious injuries as police used water cannons against protesters on Tuesday. The West has voiced strong concern over the violence and rejected the use of force against the protesters. Aung Suu Kyi is under house arrest while many other NLD officials have also been detained since the 1st of February military coup. Suu Kyi's party, NLD, says Myanmar's military also raided and destroyed the party's headquarters. Meanwhile, another British lawmaker has slammed Indian oppression in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Richard Burgon said New Delhi is violating human rights by denying Kashmiris their right to self-determination. In a video message, Burgon said London has a special duty to help the people of Kashmir and end their suffering. He also reminded the United Nations of its unfulfilled promise of the right of self-determination for them. Burgon said India put Kashmiris under lockdown way before coronavirus and committed gross atrocities. He said that it is unfortunate that Kashmiris have to wait decade after decade for justice. Now, the United States says it is closely monitoring the border disputes between India and China. At a news briefing, State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Washington supports a direct dialogue between the two sides. Price said the U.S. will continue to support a peaceful resolution of the ongoing border dispute. His remarks followed a phone call between Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his Indian counterpart Subramaniam Jaishankar. The State Department said the call's purpose was to reaffirm bilateral relations and discuss issues of mutual concern. New Delhi and Beijing have been locked in a military standoff over their disputed mountainous border at Ladakh. Now moving to Iran, where President Hassan Rouhani says Tehran is ready to resume compliance with the 2015 nuclear deal only if the United States fulfills its commitments. At a meeting, Rouhani said no one should expect Iran to take the first step as Tehran has not left the deal. Earlier, Iran's intelligence minister warned that Iran could push for a nuclear weapon if harsh international sanctions remain in place. Mahmoud Alavi reiterated Iran's nuclear program is peaceful, but Tehran could reverse its course if concerned. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden has said Washington will not lift sanctions to get Iran to the negotiating table. Now, Palestinian factions Fatah and Hamas have agreed on the mechanisms for the upcoming legislative and presidential elections. In a joint statement, the 12 Palestinian factions pledged to abide by the timetable for the long-delayed balloting and accept the results. The factions also agreed to establish an elections court based on judges from Jerusalem and the West Bank and Gaza. It said no one other than the Palestinian police will guard voting sites in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Now, the two sides also agreed to release detainees held on political grounds and allow unrestricted campaigning. The reconciliation was reached at the end of the two-day session of intra-Palestinian talks in Egypt's capital, Cairo. Now, the European Union has called on Israel to stop demolishing Palestinian homes. In a statement, a foreign policy spokesperson said Tel Aviv should facilitate aid access to Palestinian communities instead. They said the bloc considers Israel's actions illegal and an impediment to a viable two-state solution. The spokesperson said Brussels firmly opposes Israel's settlement policies such as forced transfers, evictions, demolitions and confiscations of homes. They said some 60 Palestinians, including 35 children, have been displaced after 46 homes were demolished recently in the Jordan Valley. Now, in Azerbaijan, at least 14 people have died in mine explosion in the Upper Karabakh region since the inking of the truce. Russia brokered the peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia last November after 6 weeks of war. The Prosecutor General's office says 14 citizens, including 5 Azeri soldiers, were killed by mines planted by the Armenian forces. In a statement, it said 52 soldiers and 8 civilians were also injured in the explosions. Civilians have been cautioned from entering the liberated areas until the region is cleared of mines. Turkey has signaled willingness to compromise with the US over Russian S-400 ballistic missile defense system. In an interview, Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said Ankara may refrain from full deployment of the Russian system. Akar said the defense systems will only be operational in the time of crisis on the basis of Turkey's threat perception. The defense minister also expressed the intent to negotiate with the US to resolve the issue. However, he said that without solving the issue of US backing for PKK in Syria, the S-400 issue cannot be settled as well. Ankara's purchase of the Russian missile defense battery has put extra strain on US-Turkey relations. Moving on now, Russia has called recent comments by the European Union emotional amid the economic crisis and the pandemic. This comes after the EU's top diplomat warned Moscow of new sanctions over the jailing of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. In an interview, Russian lawmaker Vladimir Zabarov said the EU thinks that it can meddle in their internal affairs. Earlier, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell said his last visit to Moscow had cemented his view that Russia wants to divide the West. He called the government of President Vladimir Putin merciless, authoritarian and afraid of democracy. Now, the United Kingdom approved the sale of arms worth $1.9 billion to Saudi Arabia last year. Official figures show the sale of July and September 2020 includes missiles and bombs. The deal was approved last year after the lifting of a ban on weapons sales to the Gulf country. The United Kingdom's Court of Appeal concluded that there were only isolated incidents of civilian casualties in Yemen war. However, critics have slammed the move as immoral and akin to putting profit before Yemeni lives. The campaign against arms trade said the UK-made weapons played a devastating role in creating a humanitarian crisis in Yemen. French President Emmanuel Macron says he will send his advisor to Beirut this weekend to follow up on the government formation in Lebanon. Local media reported Patrick Durrell will meet several Lebanese officials during his visit. Macron had proposed a resolution plan for Lebanon, but it has not been adopted yet by politicians in the office. Last month, the French president said he will pay a third visit to Lebanon to speed up the formation of a new government. Meanwhile, Qatar has also said it is ready to facilitate dialogue between the Lebanese lawmakers. Lebanon has yet not been able to form a new administration since Hassan Diab's government resigned 6 days after the Beirut explosion last year. Moving on now, the United Nations has sent 60 truckloads of humanitarian aid to Idlib in northwestern Syria. The aid will be distributed to those in need in the region and nearby rural areas. The trucks carrying supplies pass through the Kilvegozu border gate in Turkey's southern Hatay province. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed in the Syrian civil war and millions more have been displaced since 2011. Now, Idlib falls within a de-escalation zone forged under an agreement between Turkey and Russia. The area has been the subject of multiple ceasefire understandings which the Assad regime and its allies have frequently violated. Now, the UN envoy to Yemen has urged the Houthis to halt their large-scale offensive on the central city of Marib. In a tweet, Martin Griffiths said the rebel attacks threaten diplomatic efforts for peace. The UN envoy said a negotiated political settlement is the only sustainable solution to the conflict. Now, this comes after Griffiths visited Iran to discuss the crisis with Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif and other top officials. Meanwhile, a Houthi court has sentenced 11 Yemeni lawmakers to death in absentia over their support for the government. Earlier, the Yemeni army announced that it had killed or captured dozens of rebels. Moving on, World Health Organization data shows that the global number of new coronavirus cases has declined for the fourth straight week. Mexico has more than 10,000 new cases and over 1,700 deaths in the last 24 hours. While globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.3 million lives and infected nearly 107 million people. More on coronavirus in this report. While vaccines have started providing much-needed hope for the world, experts believe that it is going to take years to figure out how COVID-19 emerged. Even as Canada gradually eases curbs, it has further restricted non-essential travel in and out of the country. Over in South America, the vaccination drives have kicked off in a number of states. Vaccine rollouts have also started on Chile's remote South Pacific Easter Island, famous for its distinctive ancient stones. Peru launched its inoculation campaign with China's Sinopharm, while Venezuela is also scheduled to receive the Russian Sputnik V next week.
The vaccination we have started today is only a first step in the long road that we are traveling. Not only us, all nations around the world, to defeat this insidious and invisible enemy that is the pandemic caused by COVID-19. I hope it is only months. We are betting as much as possible that all Peruvians can be vaccinated in the year of the bicentennial of independence.
The United Kingdom scientific advisors have designated a new version of the Kent variant with a mutation found in the South African variant as a variant of concern. COVID-19 accounted for the highest proportion of deaths in England and Wales of any week so far during the pandemic. Meanwhile, Greece is also set to impose a total ban on public movement in the Attica region till February 28.
Today, the danger is reappearing, not only in the form of thousands of sick and deaths, but with two facts that greatly worry us. On the one hand, the increase of hospitalizations where the health facilities are gradually filling up, and on the other hand, the mutations of the virus that seem to accelerate its transmissibility. We could wait a few more days, but the alarm bells are ringing, and we have learned to act in order to prevent the problem, and not follow behind the problem in order to save lives.
Elsewhere, the French Parliament has approved an extension of the state of health emergency in the country until 1st of June. Spain's coronavirus cases have crossed 3 million, making Madrid only the 7th nation to hit this grim milestone. Hungary is set to become the first European Union country to use the Russian Sputnik V vaccine this week. Meanwhile, Pakistan has recorded another 62 deaths from COVID-19 overnight, raising the death toll to 12,128. The Health Ministry has reported 1,072 new infections since yesterday. The ministry says the infections tally has crossed 557,000. It adds over 514,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. The number of active COVID-19 cases in the country has reached 30,512. The ministry says nearly 32,000 tests were conducted during the past 24 hours. Now, amid exhaustive efforts to rescue the missing mountaineers, Pakistan has assured the Chilean government that it would make all possible efforts to trace the missing heroes. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi held a telephonic conversation with his Chilean counterpart André Alemand. Qureshi expresses deep concern over the missing team of the mountaineers. Meanwhile, the General Secretary of the Alpine Club of Pakistan, Qarad Haidari, says the search operation will continue today. He told Indus News that no search flight was conducted on Tuesday due to harsh weather conditions as hopes for their survival fade. Pakistan's Muhammad Ali Sudpara, John Snorri from Iceland, and Juan Pablo Moore from Chile went missing on Friday after summiting the world's second tallest peak. Meanwhile, all foreign climbers at the K2 base camp have decided to end the winter expeditions considering the harsh weather conditions. Now, the United States says it plans to continue to seek extradition of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange from the UK to face hacking conspiracy charges. Assange is facing 17 espionage charges which carry a maximum sentence of 175 years in prison. Talking to reporters, Justice Department spokesman Mark Raimondi said Washington will challenge a British judge's ruling that turned down Assange's extradition. In a January 4 ruling, the judge said it would be oppressive to extradite Assange to the US based on his mental condition. The judge set Friday as a deadline for the US to appeal her ruling forbidding Assange's extradition. Meanwhile, Assange's supporters have been pressing the Biden administration to drop charges against him. Now, in the U.S. state of Minnesota, one person has been killed and 4 others wounded in a shooting at a health clinic northwest of Minneapolis. Officials say 3 of the injured are in critical condition. Police say a 67-year-old male suspect has been taken into custody. Investigators believe the suspect acted alone and singled out the clinic over a personal grudge against the facility or its staff. Bomb technicians are investigating several suspicious devices left at the crime scene at a motel where the suspect was staying. The United Arab Emirates' first mission to Mars has entered the red planet's orbit after a 7-month journey of 494 million kilometers. The mission's project manager, Omran Sharaf, announced the success of the probe. In a tweet, Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center said the HOPE probe will provide the first holistic picture of the Martian atmosphere. UAE's space agency has now become only the 5th to reach Mars. Now, European stocks are trading modestly higher as traders digest a slew of new corporate earnings. European Stock 600, London's FTSE 100, Italy's FTSE MIB and the CAC 40 in Paris have all gained fractionally. However, Frankfurt's DAX has slipped marginally under the flat line. Earlier, all major Asian bourses gained. And now let's have a look at the weather updates. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.